Thank you, Chairman Moran, and thank you for your continued partnership on aviation safety issues. I enjoy being your partner on this subcommittee. And I want to thank both the chairman of the Commerce Committee and the ranking member for your work with us as well. I do want to extend, first and foremost, my condolences to the family members of the victims, some of whom are here with us today, both on the commercial airliner as well as the family members who lost the brave soldiers in the Black Hawk helicopter. These are folks who put on the colors of this great nation, committed themselves to defending this great nation, and were at their duty stations training to protect and defend us as they lost their lives. I also want to thank the first responders and everyone at NTSB for their tireless work to get us the answers that we all are looking for. There's a saying, and as many of you have heard it, our aviation regulations are written in blood. So we have an obligation to the victims to learn what went wrong and prevent a collision like this from ever happening again. As a former Black Hawk pilot myself, and I have flown helicopters out of very congested aircraft at Midway Airport. In fact, I commanded the Midway unit for a number of years. I know how challenging this type of mixed-use airspace can be. But a challenging airspace is no excuse. This should never have happened. This collision was horrendous, and it is heartbreaking. But it was not a surprise. Our alarm bells about potential collisions have been ringing for years. Coming out of the pandemic, we saw a frightening rise in close calls and an erosion of our aviation system's margin of safety. We've known for years that we need more air traffic controllers and more safety technology. The warnings have been clear, and in some cases, right here within this committee, and a bipartisan consensus on the need to upgrade the equipment and the need to train more air traffic controllers. In November 2023, we held a hearing on close calls. NTSB Chair Hamady testified, citing staffing shortages, fatigue, distraction, deviation from FAA regulations, and a lack of runway safety technology. And she warned, and I quote, "The concerning uptick in such incidents is a clear warning sign that the U.S. aviation system is sharply strained. We cannot wait until a fatal accident forces action. We must act before there is a tragedy," end quote. Chairwoman, just sadly predictive of what's going to happen. And you said that in 2023. At the same hearing, the National Air Traffic Controller Association's president told us that staffing shortages were so bad that many air traffic controllers were working mandatory overtime, 6-day work weeks, and 10-hour days. He warned, and I quote, "Over the long term, this will continue to introduce unnecessary risk into the system," end quote. So we passed in a bipartisan way FAA reauthorization bill last year to help rebuild our aviation workforce and make critical investments in safety. The FAA is still implementing that new law, but clearly Congress has more work to do to shore up aviation safety in this great nation. In December of 2024, we held another hearing. The GAO told us that more than 75% of our aging air traffic control systems are unsustainable or potentially unsustainable. The deadly collision at DCA is not the only aviation safety incident so far this year. We've seen deadly crashes in Philadelphia and Alaska, a crash landing in Toronto that miraculously everyone survived, even after the aircraft flipped upside down. Earlier this month, we saw passengers standing on the wing of a 737 aircraft in Denver to escape a fire. And near misses keep happening. In February, a Southwest flight came within 200 feet of colliding with a FlexJet plane at Midway Airport. At such a dangerous time for aviation safety, when we need to bolster our workforce and invest in technology, the last thing we should be doing is making cuts to the FAA. Yet 2 weeks after the DCA crash, the Trump administration began firing hundreds of FAA employees. I say all of this because it is important context we need to keep in mind during today's hearing. We need to understand what happened at DCA, but we also need to understand how this fits into a much larger threat to aviation safety. According to the NTSB, DCA had many close calls in recent years between October 2021 and December 2024. As the chairman has said, there were more than 15,000 instances of commercial aircraft coming close to rotary wing aircraft. 85 of those had a vertical separation of less than 200 feet. And last year, there were also 2 high-profile runway close calls at DCA. NTSB's preliminary report raises several questions. Most notably, how did FAA allow a helicopter route to come within 75 feet of a runway approach? FAA has deconflicted the airspace, but DCA is not the only airport in the country where airplanes and helicopters share congested airspace. Several of us raised this at an earlier briefing, and thankfully, FAA is now evaluating 8 cities where this may also be an issue, including in Chicago. We also need to know more about what helicopter pilots knew about their altitude. Was their equipment working properly? Voice recordings showed the pilot and instructor pilot indicated different altitudes as they approached the Key Bridge, and NTSB determined that some of the altitude information on the helicopter's data recorder was invalid. There are also questions about ADSB. Why was the helicopter not transmitting ADSB out? Do commercial aircraft need to be equipped with ADSB in? How come so many helicopters are allowed exemptions from the ADSB out requirement at DCA? So I look forward to hearing from our witnesses, and I yield back, Chairman.